Mr Nonsense by Richard J. Bunn. Chapter 3. BloobyTech. In a very unusual company called BloobyTech, Mr Cuthbert ran a fabulous laboratory. It made special silliness sachets, added to the tap water in the United Kingdom to make sure everyone got enough nonsense in their diets. It made people just have a slightly more fantastical day than they would without it. Mr Cuthbert's special sachets were also sold to many other countries. Not all of them, though, which was why some countries were generally more serious than others. To imagine the BloobyTech laboratory, think of a place as big as a supermarket car park. It was painted lots of colours as bright as a rainbow, and it had a huge high ceiling, as high as a palace. Mr Cuthbert produced a lot of nonsense. It was carefully vacuumed off him and it was used to make the silliness sachets, but his special dust was so popular that even he couldn't make enough. That was why he needed a bit of help, and that was why there were always a lot of children at the laboratory too. After all, a human child can make 5 times more nonsense than they actually need per day. Nonsense gnomes, as you may remember, produce 500 times more than they need. Children can make extra nonsense mostly by having fun. That's why the laboratory was so fun. It had bouncy green inflatable paths. It had 2 large sets of yellow tickle rollers. It had water guns and sand pits and soft play and train rides and big balloons and trained professionals who made silly faces and read funny stories and said words like eyeballs in silly voices. Children came to visit. They had a nice time, and the released nonsense went into special pipes in the floors and walls. And on the other side of the laboratory was the production centre. This room was full of bubbling tubes and vats. It was full of steam and equipment. It had big electrical rods that crackled. It was full of very intelligent people in white coats. This is because raw nonsense was refined using electricity. It was passed through smoke and into those vats. Then it cooked. Raw nonsense is cooked for 4 hours. The recipe is very mysterious and complicated, and the process was really only understood by Mr Cuthbert. Whilst it was being made, he always walked up and down with a long tasting spoon. And he'd taste everything, and he'd say things like, add a teaspoon of strawberry jam here. Or, oh dear, this batch will have to go in the bin. It's got burnt. Once it was cooked, the nonsense was diluted, dissolved, evaporated into powder, and distributed in special sealed pods. Mr Cuthbert used a hot air balloon to ship them overseas. He didn't really need to do that. He just thought balloons were great. Enough explanation. On with the story. Chapter 4. Mr Tingle Tangle. One of the people working at BloobyTech was called Ryan Tingle Tangle. He was a young man with very blonde hair. He worked for BloobyTech as their Vice Deputy Assistant Director in charge of compliance, VDAC. That's a special grown-up way of saying that he had a job that sounded quite important, but nobody knew what he actually did. Ryan had been given the job because Mrs. Blooby's lawyer had said they needed a VDAC. By one of those marvellous coincidences of life, Mrs. Blooby's lawyer was Uncle Harold. Ryan Tingle Tangle's real name was Ryan Cooper. He had changed it legally to something he thought sounded more nonsensical. He wanted to be in charge of the nonsense laboratory. He was sure he could do a better job of it than Mrs. Blooby and Mr. Cuthbert.
Mrs. Blooby! Mrs. Blooby, ma'am!
Mrs. Blooby was the lady who owned the whole of BloobyTech Labs. When she saw Mr. Tingle Tangle, she sighed and looked at her secretary, whose name was Jack. Jack shrugged and looked embarrassed. Jack mouthed the word, "Sorry," without actually saying it out loud. This was because one of Jack's jobs was to stop people from bothering Mrs. Blooby. Unfortunately, Mr. Tingle Tangle had been hiding, crouched down by the printer. Of course, this was not really Jack's fault.
"Ah, Mrs. Blooby," said Ryan with a big smug smile. "How lovely to see you. You're looking wonderful, if I may say. When's your 30th birthday? Must be coming up. I do hope you enjoyed those lovely muffins I left on your desk.
Mrs. Blueby was not 30. She was 80 years old. She loved muffins, but she didn't really like Ryan Tingle-Tangle. She didn't like being told she looked young either. She thought it made it sound like there was something wrong with being old, and she thought being old was great. It was a bit achy, but you could wear any colour you liked, and you could pretend to be deaf for fun.
Oh, yes, I'm sure they were lovely,
said Mrs. Blueby vaguely. Mrs. Blueby hadn't eaten the muffins that Ryan had left on her desk. They were clearly from a shop, and she liked to make her own. She'd given them to Jack, and Jack had given them to a homeless man on his walk from his house that morning.
I wondered if you'd had a chance to go over any of the ideas in my last report,
asked Ryan with another of his big, horrible smiles. It shouldn't be possible for a smile to be horrible, but Ryan's smile made him look like he was sucking on a squelchy slug.
They could make you a lot of money.
Ryan, said Mrs. Blueby firmly. She didn't call him Mr. Tingle-Tangle. She liked calling people by their first names because she thought it was more friendly. Ryan looked very angry. He tried and failed not to show on his face how angry he was. He hated it when people called him by his first name, like he was an ordinary person. He wanted people to call him Mr. Tingle-Tangle. He wanted people to show him respect and to treat him better than everyone else.
Ryan,
said Mrs. Blueby again. Her voice was very friendly and gentle.
I have enough money.
Yes, but if you just stop selling your nonsense supplements to the government and start selling them privately, you could make 10 times more, said Ryan.
Well, that would mean that a lot of people wouldn't be able to afford them.
Who cares?
Said Mr. Tingle-Tangle cruelly. He noticed that Mrs. Blueby was looking at him in shock.
With all that extra money, you could do lots of good stuff, for charity and whatever.
People need nonsense, said Mrs. Blueby firmly. They need to be able to play with their families, and they need to be able to have fun with their pets. They need to have silly ideas and funny thoughts. It makes their lives happier, and it makes the world more interesting.
Ryan was waving his finger at Mrs. Blueby, like he was telling her off.
I don't think you ate the muffins I brought you, did you, ma'am?
No, I didn't.
Don't worry, I've brought more,
said Mr. Tingle-Tangle with his big fake smile. He held up a plastic bag and waved it in his boss's face. Mrs. Blueby was a very patient woman, but she was getting a bit cross.
I only really like them when they're homemade. I'm sorry, I'm sure yours are very nice. Now, if you'll excuse me, I am late for my coffee appointment.
Oh, but I thought we could have lunch together, said Ryan. Although, I think people will think we're boyfriend and girlfriend and love to kiss one another.
Mrs. Blueby shuddered.
I don't think so, and I don't think that's a very appropriate thing to say to your boss.
Ryan made a sad face.
I'm sorry, he said. I can't do anything right.
Mrs. Blueby's face softened. She was a very nice lady, and Ryan was still a very young man.
Just focus on helping people, Ryan, she advised. That's how to do well in this company.
I will, I promise, he said earnestly. Will you please just take a few bites of this muffin?
She sighed.
Okay,
she said. She took the one he was holding out and had a few big bites.
Lovely,
he said with a sly smile.
And now I really must go, said Mrs. Blueby,
and she hurried off. She was late to meet her daughter and her grandchildren. I can make you a proper appointment next time, Ryan, said Jack helpfully. That way you won't interrupt Mrs. Blueby's coffee appointment and she'll have more time for your ideas. Ryan whirled round angrily.
It's Mr. Tingle-Tangle,
he shouted furiously. He was still so young that his voice was breaking hoarsely as he shouted,
"You'd better remember that, you cheesy worm!"
"No, hold on," said Jack in surprise. But Ryan had already stormed off, slamming the door on his way out.